Today I want to talk about the Melt the Ice hat. This is a hat that if you have been on Ravelry at all in the last couple of weeks, you've definitely seen it. It's been, I think, on the top 10 for the last 2 weeks. This is a hat pattern that you can make in red yarn of fingering, DK, or worsted weight, and you can either knit it or crochet it. This was put out by Skein Yarn Shop in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and of course this is a protest hat that was inspired by the protest hats worn by Norwegian anti-Nazi protesters back in the 1940s. And as Minnesota has a high concentration of immigrants from Norway, it's a way to honor their ancestry and fight fascism, which is again taking hold in the United States, and definitely has become very visible in the last little bit. I would say that fascism has been taking hold for the last several years, but has become a lot more visible lately because of the actions of ICE. And I think a lot of us have been horrified at recent events. This pattern has been very popular on Ravelry. That's how it's gotten in the top 10 of the hot right now. And so far they've raised over $250,000 for immigration resource organizations in Minnesota through the pattern sales. Now, there's a lot of conversation online about this hat and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to be knitting it. And I did want to weigh in on that. So number one, I am against ICE and against fascism. And this hat pattern is probably not one I will make, but I don't see anything wrong with making it. I think the first question, or the first thing that I see, maybe the most common thing I see people talking about, is that the pattern is performative. And I actually don't disagree with that. It is performative to make something. I mean, this hat is it's red, it's kind of an odd shape. It's definitely making a statement, and people who are buying it and knitting it are spending quite a bit of time making this statement. So of course it is performative. Does knitting the hat directly help any immigrants? No, it does not. It is performative. And maybe one could say it's purely performative despite the funds raised. You could also just make a donation. But I think a lot of people use calling something performative as kind of a dismissive statement. And I actually don't think that being performative or doing something that is performative is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think protest is a form of performance as well. For one thing, performative activism brings awareness. When someone sees you wearing this odd little cap, it's going to start a conversation. It's going to give the wearer an opportunity to talk about immigration and deportations and ICE. And I think that those conversations are a good opportunity for that person to kind of let others know how they feel about things and advocate for these causes that they believe in. The other thing I think that's important is it builds solidarity kind of within the movement. And I'm thinking, a lot of folks are saying, hey, like, maybe you don't know what these people are doing that are knitting the hats. Maybe they're doing other things and you don't know. But I'm actually thinking of the person who, there may be people who just make the hat. And is there anything wrong with that? And I don't think so, but I think there's a little bit of nuance to that. So the reason I don't think it's a problem to just make the hat is if someone's just making the hat, it might just be their first step into activism, and they may never take a second step. I don't think the time when someone is taking their first kind of teetering steps into activism is a time to give them a purity test. I would hope that kind of in this movement we would take people who are just getting started under our wing and tell them we're glad you're here and here's other things that you can do to get involved, and not turn them away because their first steps are very performative. When I think of these red hats, it does almost bring to mind other red hats, not the Norwegian red hats, but the Make America Great Again red baseball caps that Trump supporters wore during the 2016 elections. I think seeing other people and a bunch of other people wearing those caps definitely emboldened the people who supported Trump even a little bit, and really cemented his hold in the US and his popularity. And I think that we want that emboldenment within the activism community, and I think having kind of an emblem like that can help unite people. And it's not necessarily that everyone needs to make one of these hats to do that, but for some people that may be the thing that gives them the courage to take a second step. And I don't think we should turn them away from that. The other thing that performance does is it spreads the word about what's going on, what's happening. And the people who are wearing the hat, or even making that hat, if you're making a hat in public, people will always walk up and talk to you about what you're making, and tell you about some family member that they had that also knit. And I think that's a good opportunity to connect what you're making and the act of creation to the cause. And I live near the ice facility here in Portland, and my boyfriend gets his car oil changed, and so do I, at an auto mechanic shop that's really close to that facility, even closer than where we live. And we were dropping his car off on the way to work last week, and there was one protester out because it was early in the morning, and my boyfriend doesn't really watch the news as closely as I do, and he hadn't heard about a lot of the things that are going on with the ice right now, and he was like, oh wow, they're out here early in the morning. And I said, hey, like, yeah, they're murdering citizens in the street. And we ended up talking about it pretty much the whole way to work. On the way to work, he learned about it, and he, at the end of the commute, he was, I think, moved to have a little bit of a stronger opinion towards wanting to stop ICE than before we started talking about it. But I think like that one protester standing there with their sign was also performative. And they also started a conversation around the things going on, and they probably didn't even know that that's something that they did. But I think these hats have the ability to do the same thing, and I think those two things, the awareness and the solidarity, are things we really want to create, especially this year. Don't forget, in the US, 2026 is a midterm year where a lot of our local representatives are up for re-election, and this is a really important time to have public outrage and public support for immigration reform and having more sane public policies. And we want lots of people to be on our side right now. I want to include some resources for those of you who would like to do more than just knit the hat. The first thing you can do is donate to causes that support immigrant rights. You can speak up in conversations with family and friends. You can go to a protest. You can call your representatives. And lastly, please, if you're in the US or anywhere that has voting, be sure you register to vote and really research the candidates and support candidates who support the causes that you support. I think it's really important, especially right now, to be very well educated about the issues and to make sure your voice is counted and heard. I think the people who have enacted the awful things that we're seeing today really do not want us out there making our voices heard, and I think that alone should be enough to send us out there and get us to the polls. So I've included some links below with some resources on kind of all of those things, both places you can donate. There's a website that gives you some talking points for calling your representatives. There's a link to register to vote in the U.S. if you are a U.S. citizen, and by far this is not a comprehensive guide to what you can do to get involved, but I hope it can give you a good start if you weren't sure where to start. So that said, I hope you all have a great week. Bye.